And welcome everybody. I'd like to introduce Yiqi from Cornell, who's been trying to analyze the interaction between land carbon ecologies and the global climate across the world, so the entire land carbon cycle. Welcome, Yiqi.
Well, thank you, Greg, for the invitation, and also thank everyone on the line. Online on the screen for attending. Actually, I changed my title a little bit to make it more fit. So, sorry.
It should be just keep on in the window. It'll if you use your mouse, it'll probably just stick without showing up.
This is my talk.
Yes.
This is not my talk.
Oh, wrong talk.
This is my talk.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Perfect.
Now this is
yes, that's the one.
Yeah. I changed my title a little bit to understanding, predicting, and managing land carbon cycle to bend the climate warming curve. And probably this title a little bit fit more to the content of my talk. So I introduce the question, why and how we can bend the climate warming curve. And then I'll talk about understanding, predicting, and managing the land carbon cycle. Under the understanding, I'll talk about the phenomenon called a moving attractor conceptual framework we developed called the dynamic disequilibrium, and the mathematical representation of the land carbon cycle using matrix equation, which also we invented. And then we talk about the prediction. So due to the time limit, I'm mainly focused on the AI related. So my lab has developed a few generations of so-called IR2, and the first called the PRODA, process guided machine learning and the data-driven modeling, being the biogeochemistry informed neural network, and the SEREN, scientifically interpretable reasoning network. And now let me get to introduction. So probably you know that this is published in New York Times, and it showed that by end of 2024, Earth's surface temperature already increased by 1.6 degrees Celsius comparing to pre-industry. And this increasing of global surface temperature, it's mainly caused by so-called greenhouse gas building up in the atmosphere. So based on the instrumental measurement, atmospheric CO2 concentration has increased from about 315 ppm, now get to more than 400. And the week during, it's about 1 year ago, more than 1 year ago, it's already got to 428. I think this week must be CO2 concentration higher than 430 some. So also, scientists based on physical principle that predicted that building up the greenhouse gases in atmosphere will lead to the global warming. Now scientists use the data of atmospheric CO2 concentration and Earth's surface temperature. They see that's a very tight relationship between Earth's surface temperature and the CO2 concentration. So if we really want to slow down or even slow down the warming and even bend the climate warming curve, we must understand, predict, and manage the carbon cycle. And my research area is mainly on terrestrial ecosystem. So land carbon cycle, I will not touch the marine part, ocean part. So then let me get to the topic related to understanding land carbon cycle. The first issue I would like to bring up, so-called the moving attractor. So this photo was taken in probably 2015, around 2015. Probably, I'm not sure what you see from this figure. I mean, what would be your impression? I know many of you probably cannot speak.
Well, nature taking over is what this looks like.
Yeah, it's taking over. So this is the island near Shanghai, China, and the people who lived there moved out about 20 years before the photo was taken. You can see after people left and the plant vegetation basically take over. Thinking about in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, even 100 years later, what this place would look like. It's probably going to be a coast forest, forest land, and probably those houses are already, collapsed. And basically, for 100 years, no one there, and fully took over by vegetation. So also thinking about Manhattan, or San Francisco, or Los Angeles, Manhattan looks highly commercialized, and it's man-made systems. And if somehow we magically and everyone leave that place for 300 years, no one will be there. What would you think? What will look like in 300 years? And probably, those high rise will collapse, and the tree will take off from those cracks, and in the probably 300 years, this place will covered pretty much like this so-called mixed forest. So that means without any human activities, nature, the mother nature, has its own ability to basically take over the land, and then this and governed by basically the vegetation. So this probably may bring you the concept about succession. Succession has been studied by ecologists for decades, and it's very well recorded that established vegetation after disturbance, and then some species will take over and gradually reach the basic approach to the old forest. And if the climate condition didn't make dramatic change. So those succession, ecological concept on succession mainly focus on those species dynamics, how species take over. But from a carbon cycle perspective, actually the carbon cycle somehow converges towards some attractors that's basically by Mother Nature. So this convergence towards some of attractors by Mother Nature, what determined those? What are those processes that driving the convergence of land carbon cycles? So this is the first question we asked. So now let's review those fundamental processes of land carbon cycle, which involves photosynthesis that convert the inorganic carbon basically carbon dioxide in atmosphere to organic carbon. Those organic carbon, so-called photosynthesis, and being used partly for autotrophic respiration, partly for growing the leaf and the stem and the roots. Once those leaf, senescence and become little fall, and little on the soil surface or within soil will decompose, partly release the carbon dioxide through so-called heterotrophic respiration, partly incorporate into soil. Soil also goes through decomposition and the synthesis, those basically cycling. So what my lab has done is to try to examine all those major processes to see what really governing those processes. So we synthesized thousands of data, whatever the data we can put a hands on. So almost all data we try to synthesize, and we publish a ton of the paper, dozens of paper. Here we just don't have time to show you. But one thing we showed you is that basically like a leaf little fall. So we called that the leaf that's falling down, the contributing part we call the donor pool, and the little surface basically fall down, we call the recipient pool. Actually, this little fall itself, it's controlled by donor pool, have nothing to do with the recipient pool. So this process we call the donor pool dominated carbon transfer, and this can be written mathematically by these equations. This is a first order kinetic equations. And actually we find that leaf a little fall, little decomposition, soil organic carbon decomposition, and the soil organic carbon along forest edge, and after cultivation, vertical profile, almost all the data indicate that carbon transfer among the pool is dominated by the so-called donor pool. So this is one of the key properties that's governing the land carbon cycle. And actually, this is probably one of the most important properties that's governing. And then the other properties that's including photosynthesis as the primary carbon influx pathway, carbon cycle always compartmentalized. And the first order kinetic for carbon transfer from the donor pool seems like governing most of the carbon cycle processes.
So let me understand. Obviously, you're saying that leaves fall down, trees fall down, go into soil, become the recipient pool.
Yeah.
But then it sounds like you're saying what's not important is perhaps the decomposition dynamics inside the soil or rainfall, as it affects the soil itself. Is that what you're saying?
No, I only means the carbon transfer, like within soil. Soil also has a decomposition. Soil decomposition is more controlled by the substrate amount, not by the product of a reaction.
Okay, so then is the statement that most carbon in soil comes from trees, from these donor pool, as opposed to anything else, like animals, perhaps.
Yeah, animal also once the animal dead, and then these become a substrate of a microbe.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So based on those four properties, actually those four properties, it's like an invisible hand. In economy, probably you heard about Adam Smith's. That four internal properties, as I mentioned, that actually driving carbon cycle dynamics towards the moving attractors. And this basically they lead to our proposition of a new conceptual framework called a dynamic disequilibrium of the terrestrial carbon cycle under global change. And the key idea is somehow ecosystem it's behave as like a transformer or signal responders and respond to the external forcing and generate signals. Basically, that's responses. So in this paper, we divided the external forcing to 5 types. The first one called a periodical climate, like a seasonal change or diurnal change, and disturbing events like fire, and the climate change like rising atmospheric CO2 and warming, disturbance regime. Basically, that's long-term, large-scale disturbance patterns, and the ecosystem state change like a tipping point. Actually, for each of the external forcing, the responses actually is highly predictable. So I wrote a paper about the predictability of the carbon cycle, which is conditioned on the external forcing. So then the next issue is what are those transformer or signal responses? And they help us to understand. So then we look at this issue. As I mentioned, this is a carbon cycle. This has high 4 properties. Actually, as long as we develop a carbon cycle model using so-called pool and fluxes structures, all the 4 properties I mentioned a while ago are actually very well covered and incorporated. And then those model structures, currently there are hundreds of model structures. I mean, about 15 years ago, I published a paper surveyed the land carbon cycle. At that time, it's already about 500. So 500 models published. So, but all the model is very similar and with similar shared model structures. And once people use the structure, they always use a differential equation to describe how the change of a pool, individual pools, relate to the carbon input into that pool and output of that pool. So what we did, actually, about more than 20 years ago, I realized actually these can be write in very simple matrix equation. But at that time, I didn't take it too serious until about 7 or 8 years later, we realized actually we can use this to do lots of theoretical analysis. So that's approach we call the matrix approach. So so far we have converted NCAR's National Center for Atmospheric Research and the Community Land Carbon Cycle version 5. And the model itself is one of probably most complicated model, nearly like 1,000 carbon and nitrogen pool. We converted that very complex model to 2 equations related to vegetation carbon and nitrogen cycle and the soil carbon and nitrogen cycle. And certainly those 4 equations can be merged into 2 equations. And we fully reproduce the behavior. Now it's a part of the CLM 6, I think. So to make this model, we make it computationally for spin up faster by 50 times. And we also make it much easier. Now, originally it has 6 modules. Now it's just, basically 2 equations. We have converted about 40 models and all representing these matrix equations. And once we convert this unified matrix equation, and then we can study models at different levels of complexity under one overarching theory. So we also use this model to work with applied mathematicians and funded by National Institute of Mathematics and Biological Synthesis. And I organized the working group. We met 4 times and tried to understand the mathematical property of land-carbon cycle based on the matrix equation. A few things I learned. One is this carbon cycle model. We, applied mathematicians call this dynamical system equation. This dynamical system equation is actually applied mathematician called non-autonomous compartmental systems. And this, during that working group, applied mathematician from King's College London, and he wrote 2 books on non-autonomous system, applied math books. And he basically, our working group showed that this matrix equation satisfied 3 conditions mathematically. And then this, once satisfied these 3 conditions, the system called behave as like exponential stability. So this system, that means that moving attractor, it's ubiquitously exists in the real world and mathematically proved. And also mathematically showed this system is highly predictable once we know the environmental conditions. So we used the matrix approach can be used, my lab has developed a variety of ways, and certainly now we worked with the community to apply this matrix equation and to pinpoint the sources of model uncertainty with so-called traceability analysis. We developed a semi-analytical spin-up to accelerate the spin-up by 50 times. And we found that the land carbon cycle is highly predictable under the certain, given we know the environmental conditions. And we used this to understand the transient dynamic, and because the computationally much faster, so it's enable data assimilation with big data to improve model parameterization. And also we used this for AI research. So now
question. What I'm getting from what you're describing is that prior work had a bunch of custom tailored kind of small equations, or I guess in the NCAR system, a bunch of like the agglomerated mini equations, and you're doing it in a more data-driven way where you have a linear model, a matrix multiplication kind of model, where your features are the raw data, the first-order derivatives of the data. You're kind of generalizing a lot of the prior modeling, so it's more trainable using ML. Is that fair?
Yes, you are correct. Actually, now we have showed this matrix equation unify land carbon cycle models. And no matter originally how they developed, as long as you use so-called pool and flux structures, there are models, don't consider pool dynamic. So those we cannot, the matrix equation cannot represent them. But any model, as long as you use pool and flux structure, they always can convert to the matrix equation. So this is unified form.
That makes sense. And I guess your implications about attractors, once you have a linear thing, you have the largest eigenvalues, they point to where that matrix is heading.
Yes.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So now, because of the, this is my 20, 30 years of research, so I have to skip lots of things, but just to give you some flavor what we did. So now it's a move to the prediction. So my lab has been, work on the model, try to understand the phenomenon and underline the mathematical the equations and the conceptual framework. Now we try to improve the model predictions. And as my lab has been used the so-called simulation model, which is, usually we develop model structure and use some meteorological data to drive the model and do prediction without consider anything below this. So this is still is a most commonly used method, like IPCC report and most modeling group use so-called this forward modeling or simulation modeling approach. And my lab's research indicate that this process-based model is powerful, but almost impossible to predict the carbon cycle accurately, and because of the parameterization issues. So my lab also one of the leading lab, or also first lab, and currently probably still leading lab, do data assimilation. So basically we use the data to improve parameterization. And after we done about 15 years, we still feel that the data assimilation alone still cannot improve the prediction well enough. So about like 6 or 7 years ago, we started thinking about how to further improve. So then we introduced the deep learning into this system and to predict the spatial pattern of parameter values over the globe. So this system we call the process-guided deep learning and the data-driven modeling, PRODA. So we use this PRODA to assimilate about 57,000 vertical profile for soil carbon over the globe, and then predict the soil carbon distribution. So the R square now, we use this product, we can get to like 0.62. And we analyze those model used in IPCCs, and their results basically R square is like 0.01, or probably not more than like 0.005. But now with this product, we can get the R square gets to 0.662. We used this to test the hypothesis regarding the mechanisms underlying the soil carbon dynamic, and we tested the two alternative hypotheses related to how microbial carbon use efficiency might influence soil carbon dynamics. And the product, it's basically used the two steps. We used the data assimilation, and then we did the deep learning to predict the spatial distribution of parameters. So we thought this it's still computationally very intensive. So now I got a new graduate student 2 years ago, and he basically wrote the biogeochemical cycle model into the neural network. And then we can use the neural network to estimate the parameter, and then use the model to estimate the parameter from a neural network and be used into a model, and then calculate the loss functions. So then use a propagation to accelerate the estimation of a parameter. Now the computationally, it's about 50 times faster than the product. And if we just use one core, one processor of a computer. we have applied to the soil carbon, and now we also apply the forest growth model. And now it's much easier to use than PRODA, and also accuracy it's slightly higher than PRODA, computationally much faster. So
Let me
now,
understand. So how are environmental covariates and forcings different? Is it like you're trying to start at an early point in time, move it over time, and predict future state of soil carbon?
can you say it again?
Sorry, so I'm trying to understand the structure of this model. Are you making predictions starting at an earlier point in time, soil carbon, and predicting future SOC?
Well, currently, the prediction is once we model develop these, and then certainly we can use a forcing to drive the model for prediction. Yes.
Right, and the neural network part, it predicts these biogeochemical parameters. So what is that? It's not SOC, it's something else?
The biogeochemical parameter is basically the matrix equation. And so far, I didn't further explain it. Basically, like NCAS soil carbon model, we use the NCAS soil carbon model. They have 70 pools, basically a vector, a matrix 70 by 70. And there are 22 parameters to governing that carbon cycle in the soil, soil systems. So we estimate 22 parameters at each of the grid point. And then we use the global structure.
Okay, so you have a highly parameterizable process-based model that's CLM51, and the primary role of the neural network is to predict the parameters of the process-based model.
Yes.
But also, and then you starting with the environmental state, you push it through time, the process-based model looks differentiable. So now you can do backpropagation through the process-based model, through the neural network, and figure out how to parameterize the model neurally.
Yes.
Fantastic. And now, when you're saying SOC, it sounds like your process-based model predicts SOC, but then forest growth model, are you using the same matrix-based model is forest growth, or are you using FBS or some simulation-based model?
So basically now, for soil carbon, we have a matrix equation. For forest dynamic, we use the different equation. So basically now we replace the equation with the forest dynamic model. So this is, the beam structure is the same, but the inside, the model different.
Okay.
Does it make
So
sense?
what is that model? Is it another matrix model, or is it a simulation thing?
No, this is a forest growth model.
Okay, something
Chapman, what's the it's a forest growth model.
Got it. And now you're predicting the parameters of that forest growth model using neural network.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
So actually, this structure is very flexible and can be applied to almost any systems, as long as we have some equations. We know the parameter, and the parameter, we know that the model need a parameterization.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Dr. Liu, could you
Yes.
please go back to the equation for the process model? Are you modeling the difference? So I see
You mean this equation?
Yes. So the I, the eta, and the x.
Well, X is a carbon pool. Carbon pool, dynamic change in carbon pool is equal to carbon influx to the system And this carbon influx will be distributed among the pool that's represented by B. And then carbon has to decompose. So this carbon pool decomposition is determined by the so-called decomposability. K value is basically first order kinetic, so-called the decomposition coefficient. And then the model simulate carbon transfers among the pools. It's determined by A matrix. A matrix is basically a carbon transfer among the pools. And this C describe the environmental regulation, like temperature and soil moisture and oxygen and basically environmental modifier. This is V is a vertical movement of a carbon cycle in soil.
Oh, okay. And in this, so the carbon influx and the environmental variables, the C, are they both exogenous? So
those forcing is exogenous.
Exogenous forcing. Okay.
Yeah.
And the matrix A. So you said it's
matrix A is basically determined by internal property.
Oh, so is it like, does it have purely imaginary eigenvalues? Is it non-dissipative?
What does it mean by non-dissipative?
Oh, as in, is it supposed to be a system that diminishes over time? So how are the matrices A, B, and V? Like,
if we take a look at this conceptual figure, the equation I is this photosynthesis, carbon coming in.
Oh, okay.
B is basically the carbon coming in once become organic substrate, they're going to partition to the different parts of the plant. So that's represented by B. And then this little decomposed, the decomposition coefficient is K. So organic carbon also decompose, the decomposition coefficient is K, basically K vector. But the A is indicate, for example, when these decompose, like soil, these the little on the soil surface decompose and partly released as heterotrophic respiration, partly go to different carbon pools, different soil carbon pools. Some go to so-called the more persistent, more recalcitrant carbon pool. Some go to more labile carbon pool. So A matrix is basically try to describe how carbon moving among the pools.
Oh, so
that makes sense. I think the question is there a notion of mass conservation?
Yes.
Yes,
conserved?
Yes, there is mass conservation.
Okay.
Well, certainly, if you got interested in, I can talk about hours after hours. That's basically we lived on this and created a lot of new concepts. And yes, there must be mass conservation.
So A has a notion of mass conservation, and what about V, the matrix V?
V is a vertical movement in the soil. There, let's say earthworm. Earthworm will move carbon, from down from surface to the deep soil. That's just one example. That's also dissolved organic carbon also move from surface to deeper. That's called a V.
Oh, okay. So in a sense, would V be a quantity that has a self-reinforcing effect?
Yeah, basically it's a
It has.
describe the process of carbon movement within soil profile.
Oh, so does V have positive eigenvalues?
I think all of them has negative eigenvalue.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
I think ultimately microbes are going to eat the deep organic carbon, so the system ultimately will stabilize, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
basically mathematically we call the exponential stability.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, exponential stability.
Oh, and these are all non-autonomous.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
non-autonomous compartmental system. And they, the mathematicians, they use the math to prove the system, this system, and follow the so-called exponential stability.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Okay.
And this stability basically try to chase the moving attractors.
Mm.
Got it.
And also mathematically proved that moving attractors ubiquitously exist in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's very
Oh,
helpful.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, and
Thank you.
yeah.
Sorry
So
about the
hear about
long
nature. No, this is good.
So now this now we are kind of collaborating with Carla Gomez at Cornell University, and basically being under this, we developed together with them. And this Josh is a student from computer science department, and now probably there is Bean basically worked on this, and now originally we used kind of a regular neural network, but now Josh basically used the developed a CAN to replace the original neural network, and now this is this so-called this is Seren. Seren is make the how different forcing encoder forcing influence parameter. Originally it's a black box. Now it's we can use this to identify the functional relationship. So is that okay? I move to next topic.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, well, a little bit probably time crunching. I'll try to be fast. So next part is a band warming curve by managing the land carbon cycle. So as I mentioned in the very early of my talk, now temperature is already exceeding 1.5. It's very urgent to basically decarbonize the atmosphere, and so if we want to reduce the carbon dioxide in atmosphere, we have to create the new pool either in the land, ocean, or geological reservation. So this means we have to create new pools in land. So in order to create a new pool in the land to remove carbon dioxide from atmosphere, we need to understand the land carbon cycle system. So how the new pool change? So probably by now, I think probably these figures make it easy for you to understand, land carbon cycles and take up carbon from atmosphere, and some of them go through plant respiration, some of them store in the biomass, and some store in the soil litter and the long-term pools. Actually, this system can be described mathematically by two parameters. One is called the residence time, tau sub e, and another is the carbon influx, mu. So if we want to create a carbon storage in the land, we have to create new increase the residence time or increase the carbon input. So actually those are two parameters to determine the size of the pool based on this relationship, residence time and the carbon influx. And so there in the literature, also in IPCC assessment, they listed about dozens of so-called the terrestrial CDR strategies. And in these, you can see most of them are related, most effective strategies are more related to forestations. So use the knowledge we have related to carbon input and the residence time, we can evaluate some of those strategies. So if we roughly look at those, you can see most of those strategies didn't change much on the carbon input, but most of those strategies, it's associated by the lengthening, basically make the residence time longer. And so this is large increase in residence time. So by our analysis, that indicate if we want to remove carbon dioxide from atmosphere to store in the land, actually there are way more flexibility to change the residence time than the change in carbon input. So we, since the time scale, I'll skip a lot of them. Actually, there are many of the way to lengthen, elongate residence time. So one of the method is called the bearing wood. So this idea was proposed by Professor Ning Zhang from University of Maryland, and he started work on these ideas about 20 years ago, and he has been still working on this. And we used basically, when I saw his idea, when I started to work on this only 2 years ago, and I was excited with his idea, and then we kind of took his idea, analyzed in the new framework that I mentioned, carbon cycle framework. And so if we can preserve all those wood debris from managed forest, like this is logging debris, this, the wood, waste wood from mill and those abandoned furnitures or wood product, if somehow we can bury them, and then it can be very effective to remove carbon dioxide. So let's say we can lengthen residence time by 2,000 years. And it's there are lots of evidence that actually if we bury wood, you can preserve for thousands of years. Then from 2025 to 2100, we can remove nearly 1,000 gigaton carbon dioxide from atmosphere. Average is 12.1 gigaton, which is almost 1/3 of the carbon dioxide emission, greenhouse gas emission, and can the basically lower the temperature warming by 0.42 degree. Even if we only can preserve the wood by 20 more years, actually this also has a huge impact. So we evaluated this in the different countries and compare with other techniques. We feel this wood debris bury probably most effective and also least expensive and easily to implement it, and certainly has some co-benefit side effect to evaluate, but I don't have much time to go over. And as I mentioned, there's almost, some of most of the material presented, it's from my own own lab's research in the past 20 some years. So my lab has organized the training course in the past 8 years. About 750 scientists from 46 countries attended, and we write a textbook for the training course, writing in such a way and easily understandable. So that's it. I understand not much time for questions.
No, we were asking throughout, which was fascinating. So one thing I want to understand is the siren work. In what sense is it interpretable, and to what extent are you able to debug your models to understand where the errors are coming from, where new scientific directions may go, anything like that?
Well, siren does, can. The idea is, in original neural network, everything is a black box. We estimate the parameter. Can is basically, certainly, as I said, I'm not a mathematician, so I'm not a computer scientist, but I did read it. So can is basically take a differential equation and partial differential equation to make the black box, the relationship developed between the neural network and parameters, and become differentiable, and then you can explicitly identify their functional relationship. Yeah.
Okay, so
This preprint, it's already online. You can, if you're interested in, you can read it.
okay. Well, actually, here's a question from Jay. How much accuracy is improved when is observed compared to the pure process-based model? So I guess the difference between process-based model by itself versus a neural network configured process-based model. What's the impact?
Well, as I mentioned, the process-based model that's used in IPCC assessment and R². I mean, when we compare model output with observation, especially for soil carbon, and I published the paper and showed all those results in 2015. And R², it's basically 0.01. And then most of the time when people use it, usually they tune the parameter by hand, in person. Then R² probably can get 0.15, and if lucky enough, can get 0.2, but it's rarely you can tune the parameter to get the level, much higher than 0.2. So my lab used the data simulation to improve the accuracy, and the highest we can get use data simulation, probably get to 0.4.
Okay.
So I was curious why, at that time, why we cannot further improve. Even we use the data to train the parameterization. So once we introduce the deep learning input and get so-called spatially explicit parameterization, and then we can get R², 0.6 something.
Okay.
So it's about 10 to 15 fold. In terms of accuracy, comparing to simulation model, 10 to 15 fold higher than the ordinary, the simulation model.
Got it. And last question, Nibod.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Liu. So in the siren, is the reasoning, is there a different model for reasoning, like some RL-based method or something? Or is it only the KANs?
We only use KAN. We no longer use neural network.
And So I was actually curious about KANs because I also work on interpretable modeling, and KANs usually have these other like exotic functions that are not necessarily differentiable. So I was wondering if for the KANs, um, do you happen to remember what type of candidate functions were used? Because
Or
this system.
our system, the carbon cycle,
Mhm,
actually it's differentiable. And
mhm,
you know, that's why we can use back propagation very well. It's
mhm,
highly differentiable. And you know, again, I'm not a computer scientist, and I'm not applied mathematician, so my math and computer science is
mhm,
very, very primitive. And
mhm.
I did read the manuscript. I understood the principle. But if you really like to know the technical details, and one thing is the siren is already online, preprint is online. And you know, also probably if you have more the very specific technical questions, you may
Ah,
talk with the first author or the Professor Kala Goma.
oh, okay. Well, this might be where I have my shameless plug-in. So we had work on interpretable modeling of dynamical systems as like either vector fields, discrete maps, or even like a neural OD formulation. And it's also interpretable in the chosen candidate function. So they're all differentiable as well. And we have a PyTorch based framework. And we also have extensions to certain symmetries. Like in this case, it's supposed to be a conserved quantity. So that could also be baked in. That's something that we are coming out with. But yes, I will send you a paper in case you're interested.
Great, great, thank you. You
Yeah.
know, we're
Thank you.
happy to learn more work. And
Yeah. Yeah. So, and thank you very much. I mean, this was fascinating look at the carbon cycle.